Hello everybody, my name is Manu-S and welcome back to another Eternal Drafts video series. Haven't done a draft in a while and I haven't drafted much at all this month, so I'm not even diamond yet, so join me on my journey towards Draft Master before the end of the season. Let's do some drafting. So let's look at a pack. We actually have a pretty good pack here. Like, Hammer of Might is really good. And both removal spells are pretty good. I mean, tendentially I like Death Strike better first pick, because, you know, it's like flexible as a fast spell and it's only a single faction, even though it's a bit harder to cast. But overall I actually like Feeding Time a bit better, because you can splash it so well into these great Elysian decks, and good removal is often like one of their bigger weaknesses, so Feeding Time is like great for these Elysian decks, for example, and you can still like splash it in some other decks too. Alright, so I think I'm like torn between Hammer of Might and Death Strike here, and I kinda like both cards since I definitely like the aggressive fire type aggro decks, unlike some other people. Like, basically my favorite archetypes I think currently are like the two fire aggro decks and Elysian. I haven't been too happy with Combrei and Feln, especially Feln is like the archetype that I hate the most by far. Like, no matter how good my Feln decks look, they most of the time way underperform relative to their looks. And I feel like with the fire aggro decks, it just kind of depends on how you're drafting. Like Rakano, for example, I think you can get really great aggressive decks if you draft them well and the draft pans out decently. And it's not even that hard because they are not that popular, so you get a lot of stuff passed fairly late. So it's not like you have to get lucky. I mean, it might be slightly better to pick Death Strike here, because it's like a bit more flexible and stuff, but Hammer is so powerful, and I just kind of feel like looking for like a Rakano aggro today. I mean, it's like admittedly worse in like Combrei, but it's still good, I guess. At least if you have an aggressive Combrei deck, or some good targets like Karmic Guardian. So yeah, I like Hammer of Might, but I couldn't fault anyone for just preferring Death Strike over it. It is probably, on average, the slightly better pick. Alright, there's the Karmic Guardian that we talked about. I mean, that card is definitely like one of the huge Combrei cards. That is definitely a Combrei staple. And given that this pack is otherwise like pretty empty, and Execute doesn't go too well with our Hammer, I'll just take Guardian here and see if we are gonna end up in Combrei or Rakano over the next couple of picks. Like, this is a pretty good pack. Like, this is not that great. This is awesome, but probably not that reasonable for us to pick at this point. Like, if there wasn't like pretty good picks for us, I would just kind of like speculatively pick this up to see if we want to just branch into that direction. But between like Groundwatch Deserter and Finest Hour, we have two good picks here. Like, I really like Groundwatch Deserter, but the thing is, we don't really know if we are Combrei or Rakano right now, and we have one good Combrei card, and this would add one good Rakano card, so we would basically waste either our second or third pick in the end. While Finest Hour is great in both decks, and great overall, and pretty important to have in these aggressive Justice decks. So Finest Hour seems like a more reasonable pick, since it's more versatile and probably even slightly better than Groundwatch Deserter, even if we end up Rakano. So Finest Hour is the card I'm gonna pick here. Okay, so another Horse Netterbed. I guess we should have really been in Shadow and would have gotten rewarded like unreasonably well. But I mean, you never know beforehand. Could have easily gotten a bunch of like green bombs, like Rakano or Combrei bombs, instead of Horse Netterbeds. Alright, so it's basically between Inspire and Tinker Apprentice, and while Tinker Apprentice is like kind of a bad top deck, it's overall a better card, I think, since it's overall basically 2/2 stats for 1 power, and making your curve drop 1 above its curve usually allows you to get a lot more attacks in or stalls the game a lot harder, and is really nice with cards like Karmic Guardian or Hammer of Might and stuff like that. So I prefer taking Tinker Apprentice here, but it is probably a close pick. Alright, so here it's between like Stalwart Shield and Teleport. Like once again, Stalwart Shield has the upside of being Justice and therefore more flexible, while Teleport is really good if we end up Combre. Like the question is how good Stalwart Shield and how important Stalwart Shield is gonna be. And I think it might not be that important for whatever deck we're gonna end up with. So I'm just inclined to take the slightly more speculative Teleport here, but it's a close call, it could be wrong. And yeah, this pack is fairly empty, and even if we are Combre, I don't care too much for Sauropod Wrangler a lot of the time, and I really just am at a point where my collection is almost complete, and I'm like picking premiums wherever I can, so I just want to take the premium Rampage. Plus, if we end up in Rakano, it's actually a good pick too. At this point, it seems unlikely. And yeah, Hellfire Rifle is not a relevant enough premium to pick up, especially if there's legitimately good pick in Teleport. So let's take that Teleport. I think here it doesn't really matter what we take, might as well just take the Humbug out of the pack. Another Teleport. I think I'm actually willing to take the third. I'm not sure if I'm willing to play 3, but definitely fine. We're like taking 3 and seeing where our deck ends up. Alright. So this pack definitely pushes us a bit more towards Rakano. Since like Outlaw is pretty good, I think. I mean, some people seem to disagree on that and think it's not that good of a draft card, but I think it's still a pretty damn good draft card. Quick Draw is really good, especially in like Rakano, where you have a bunch of combo tricks with like Rampage, Quick Draw makes Rampage so much more brutal, for example. I mean, we could take Spire Chaplain, which is definitely a pretty solid 3-drop. And Tower Top Patrol is a solid Combre card. Guess we'll just take the Chaplain because it's flexible and it's good, and Outlaw is probably... not sure if Outlaw is actually better than Chaplain and by how much. Like, I think they're probably fairly close together in power level. Just do different things. Alright, so this is like a fairly weak pack, and Ancient Lore seems like a decent addition to a Combre deck potentially. Alright, yeah, here it's like between Marshal and Avenger, and Marshal is just like answers a few more problems harder and is cheaper and more flexible, and people like get blown out by it more, which is why I prefer Marshal over Avenger. And at this point we are pretty much locked enough into Combre that everything else, the ship for everything else has basically sailed. Not a big fan of Visage card, it's just not particularly impressive. But Predator's Instinct is pretty solid in Combre usually, especially if you get some students later. And yeah, Hourglass, not a great pick. Once again, wrong colors unfortunately. So yeah, I'll take Predator's Instinct here, I like that. This is like actually a closer pick in my opinion than in the opinion of a lot of other people. I think Initiate is great in Combre and Illusion in both decks basically. And I don't know why people dislike it that much. I just think it's either like I am wrong, or they just like underestimate or under-evaluate the card and its impact. Both is possible, but so far I have really liked the card and picked it a lot and played with it a lot, and I can't say I have disliked it so far. Yeah, I mean, Healer is a really good card, but like getting like a Spire Chaplain out on 2 is a pretty big deal, and getting these 4-drops out earlier is also a big deal. But yeah, maybe I'll take Healer simply because Healer is an uncommon and a more unique effect, and Initiates go fairly late in draft a lot of the time, so you can pick them up a bit easier. Alright, so it's like Acolyte or Terrazon, probably. I mean, Dispel is a solid card too, but I think it's like less important than these two, especially given that we already have like a Marshal for Silence and Teleport to deal with some stuff in some manner, and like instincts. We have various ways of addressing a couple of problems temporarily or permanently. I mean, Terrazon is maybe just a bit too generic, and like Acolyte is just great at making decks consistent. Then again, there's not that many like cards that compare to Terrazon. It's actually like pretty good on the board. I think I might just take the Terrazon here. But I'm not sure, it's like a close pick, I guess. Another decent pick between Shepherd and Dispel. I think, given that we don't have that much top end and the card, it's kind of nice added value attached to it. I'll pick the Shepherd, but might not end up in our deck in the end, but we'll see. Dune Phantom. I mean, Avisaur is pretty nice too, but we don't have any Echo yet, and it's not the greatest splash, and Phantom is actually pretty nice, even though it's not the most aggressive. And we got a free Acolyte pretty late, that's sweet. And another Instinct, also nice. Determined Stranger, definitely welcome as well, because I happily take any Combrei Strangers we get to see. Safe Return is a possible main deck card. This is not great, but I might just take it because I have 0 and it's a legendary, and there's not that many great cards. Like Lieutenant is a pretty good finisher, I give it that, and this is a nice 2-drop, but they are both, I think, not incredibly important. Like, I like to splash that into Elysian a lot. I think in Combrei it might be a bit worse, but it's still pretty good, and I probably should be taking it, but I just feel like adding that to my collection. And we get a second Marshal, that's great. And maybe we can get back that Combrei Stranger. Not sure though if we even like get to see the same pack a second time, or if we just get like the rest of a different pack on the wheel. Probably the rest of a different pack actually. We'll take the Stranger. I mean, it fixes half of our colors and has synergy with our Determined Stranger, and if we are short on 2-drops, I can see us ending up playing this. Brighton Wisp Paladin is pretty good, but we don't have that many ways of turning it on, and like Marshal is really good. So I'm inclined to just take the third Marshal here, I think, over Brightmaze Paladin or Grunt. And I mean, that could be wrong, like Brightmaze is pretty good too. Might as well take another Stranger, maybe we end up splashing some Illusion stuff. This is a close pick between Grunt and Scribe, and I think I'm gonna take the Grunt, just because it's a bit more impactful and also a lot easier to support. And I really like the early Warcry that can get some games out of hand pretty well. And it's also a nice blocker, and we definitely lack on like actual 2-drops because Desert Marshal we don't really want to jam out there on 2. There's an Avisaur in case we want to splash that. Ambassador, Hourglass, potential Trick and Refresh. A couple of cards that we might play but might not play, we'll see that at the end. Interesting. I guess given that empty pack we just take the Harshrul and see how well that does in our deck. Monument versus Grunt. I think Monument is so good and adds so much consistency to the deck that I prefer that over Grunt, even though I also like Grunt. Alright. I think, given that we have a bunch of fixing for this, I'll just take Trainer because Trainer is great. Could have also taken Savant because Savant is pretty good too. This pack is fairly empty. I mean, we are at a point where we could splash False Prince, but it's not the greatest splash. And even sometimes we will have the Primal, but we don't have the second time on 3, so it's like not that easy to support, and it's also not that great to support because the card is still pretty fragile. Tower Top Patrol is rock solid, but I think Polymorph is just like a great splash and adds a lot to the removal troubled Combrei. Alright, yeah, I just want to go for Dispel, since we don't have one yet, and it's always nice to have. The problem is we don't really have a payoff for this yet. Don't like this card, so I'll just take this and see if we might get some more payoff for this, but I doubt it. Happily take a Tower Top Patrol here. Ooh, another Guardian, that's nice. Wrangler. And some random stuff. Deck is not looking super great, to be honest. But it looks decent. Let's see what we can make out of this. So this guy is pretty underwhelming given that we have no payoff for it. Don't think we want 3 teleport. 2 is like the maximum we want. Let's add some power. Don't think we need more than 1 primal, especially with Ember Acolyte and Double Stranger, so we have a really nice support for our splash. And yeah, 18 with 1 monument and an Acolyte is a good number. So we need to cut 5 cards. Alright, like at this point I don't think Wrangler is gonna do a whole lot for us because we only have like Terrazon, so that's an easy cut. I'm like close to cutting Finest Hour since our deck is like so not aggressive. But I mean, having 1 is still probably fine. We have some nice synergies between Safe Return and Predator's Instinct, so the Safe Returns actually seem pretty good. Plus we have some stuff like Desert Marshal to reuse, Tinker Apprentice, Karmic Guardians to grow, Serpent Trainers to rebuy. There's a bunch that these can do. I think they're gonna generate a lot of value for our deck, actually. I mean, Hammer is not gonna be great in this deck, but we're definitely not gonna go and cut that. Can see even like cutting another teleport, given that we are in a more controlling value direction now. Like, I mean, Refresh might actually be pretty nice in a deck like this, like it allows Spire Chaplain to freely attack to draw sigils and just makes for like strong blockers. But I guess we probably have pretty good blockers, so maybe we can just cut it. And like what else? I mean, I can even see cutting Tinker Apprentice now because it's sort of low impact in the way the deck panned out. In the end, we definitely didn't get like a particularly aggressive Combray deck. So yeah, I think that could be a cut. And now the question's like, Finest Hour is something that I could see cutting. Like, I kinda like Lumen Shepherd simply because we need a couple of like big guys later. Deck might have some issues closing out games because we kind of rely on a few flyers and like 3 faddies to do that, and some Safe Return shenanigans and like Hammer. But I mean, we have some solid options, so it should be alright. Okay, so I mean, Finest Hour still has a lot of merit with like Grunt and like Serpent Trainer, Guardians, Spire Chaplain. These are all like potentially good targets for Finest Hour, and also to like counter opposing like conditional removal stuff and opposing combat tricks. It's probably not bad to have one. If we wouldn't have a monument, I would be considering to go down to 17 between like Chaplain and Acolyte and some cantripping from like Dispel and stuff. But that would probably still be greedy though. So I'm kind of glad that Monument incentivizes me to not consider that, because it would probably make the deck worse rather than better. Alright, so what else? I mean, I think with the 2 Safe Returns and limited removal we want the Instincts, even though we have limited targets or like strong instincts. Maybe it should only be one. Hard to say. Don't think we want to cut this guy because a 3-3 for 3 is pretty solid, and the upside of making our color fixer 2-drops better definitely matters. And like Grunt should be a solid enough offense-defense 2-drop to be worth it, even though he is gonna be like worse than say in an aggressive deck. I mean, do I really want to cut teleport? I don't think so. I think we want at least one. So it's like Finest Hour, Grunt. I mean, that's really all that seems cuttable. I mean, I guess Tower Top Patrol is to some extent cuttable because we already have 2 Karmic Guardians. Like, how much is that Grunt really gonna do for us? Oh, like the Finest Hour. Really tough call. I guess I'll cut Finest Hour and see if I miss it too much in the first couple games. I might put it back in and cut something else. Alright, that's gonna be the deck. Gonna like hop into the games in the next video, so stay tuned for the first part of the games in a moment. Thanks for watching.